I understand your ambition, chef, but this is a business.
I know exactly what this is.
The arrogant restaurant owner thought he won when he kicked Cassie out the back door, claiming she didn't fit the vibe of his elite customers. He was so busy celebrating his new, expensive French chef that he didn't notice the quiet older man sitting in the corner booth. That man was the most feared figure in the city, a billionaire who hadn't smiled since his wife passed away, until he tasted Cassie's cooking. When he realized the heart and soul of the kitchen had been thrown away out of pure spite, he didn't raise his voice. He simply bought the entire block, took away the owner's livelihood, and handed the keys to Cassie. If you love seeing arrogant bullies get exactly what they deserve, you will want to watch every single second of this incredible story. Before we dive into this incredible story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an inspiring tale. And do me a favor, drop a comment right now and let me know which city or country you are watching from. We love reading where our community comes from. Now let's begin. Cassie knew the power of a good meal. To her, cooking wasn't just a job. It wasn't just about mixing ingredients in a pan. It was a form of magic. It was a way to heal people. She learned this from her grandmother, Big Mama, in a small, sun-drenched kitchen down south. Big Mama used to say, "Cassie, if you don't put love in the pot, you're just feeding stomachs. You've got to feed the soul." Cassie carried those words with her all the way to New York City. She was a young black woman in a world where elite kitchens were mostly run by men who screamed a lot and wore tall white hats. But Cassie didn't need to scream. Her food spoke for her. After years of working as a line cook, scraping by on minimum wage, she finally landed a job as the head chef at a high-end restaurant called Le Gilded Palate. It was located in a very wealthy, very traditional neighborhood in Manhattan. The floors were polished marble. The tablecloths were crisp white linen. The customers were politicians, CEOs, and old money families. The owner of the restaurant was a man named Alistair Vance. Alistair was a man who cared about appearances above all else. He wore slick back hair, expensive watches, and a fake smile that never reached his eyes. To Alistair, Le Gilded Palate wasn't a place for soul. It was a place for status. When Cassie was hired, the restaurant was struggling. The previous chef had served beautiful, tiny portions of food that tasted like cardboard. Cassie changed everything. She kept a fancy presentation, but she infused the food with rich, deep flavors. She made a roasted chicken that tasted like a warm hug on a rainy day. She made a seafood bouillabaisse that carried the deep, smoky secrets of the coast. Within 3 months, the restaurant was packed every single night. People were lining up around the block. Cassie worked 14 hours a day. Her hands were covered in minor burns and small cuts, but she didn't care. She was proud. She thought she had finally found her place. But Alistair Vance didn't see it that way. One Tuesday afternoon, the restaurant was empty between the lunch and dinner rushes. Cassie was in the kitchen, prepping a rich, dark reduction sauce. She was humming a song her grandmother used to sing. Alistair walked into the kitchen. He didn't look at the beautiful fresh vegetables on the counter. He didn't look at the clean, sparkling stoves. He looked at Cassie. His eyes were cold and critical. "Cassie," Alistair said, tapping his shiny leather shoe on the floor. "We need to talk." Cassie wiped her hands on her apron and smiled. "Sure, Alistair. What's on your mind? The new menu is doing great. Profits are up 30% this month." Alistair didn't smile back. He cleared his throat and adjusted his tie. "Yes, well, the numbers are fine. But we have an image to maintain, Cassie. This is a classic European-style establishment. The patrons expect a certain atmosphere." Cassie confusedly looked at him. "An atmosphere? The customers love the food, Alistair. They leave beautiful notes for the kitchen every night." "The food is aggressive," Alistair said, using a word that made Cassie's stomach drop. "It's too heavy. Too loud. And frankly, Cassie, you don't really fit the aesthetic we want to project here. When VIP customers ask to see the chef, they expect someone who looks like they belong in a French bistro." Cassie stood very still. The kitchen around her suddenly felt very cold. She knew exactly what Alistair was saying. He didn't have to use the words. His meaning was crystal clear. He liked her hard work, and he liked the money she brought in, but he didn't like her. He didn't want a black woman being the face of his prestigious restaurant. "Are you saying I don't look the part, Alistair?" Cassie asked. Her voice was calm, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. Alistair waved his hand dismissively. "Let's not make this a big deal. I've decided to go in a different direction. I've hired a new chef, a young man from Paris. He starts tomorrow." "You're firing me?" Cassie whispered. "After I saved this place from bankruptcy." "I'm letting you go." Alistair corrected her coldly. "There's a difference. Your final check will be mailed to you. Please pack your personal knives and leave through the back door. We have a private party tonight, and I don't want any drama." Cassie felt a hot tear slip down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. She refused to let Alistair see her cry. She packed her professional knife roll in complete silence. The other kitchen staff, the dishwashers and line cooks, looked at the floor. They were too afraid of Alistair to say anything. Cassie walked out of the back door into the cold, gray New York drizzle. She had no job, very little savings, and a broken heart. She felt completely invisible. That very evening, the Gilded Palette was completely booked. Alistair Vance was walking around the dining room, glowing with pride. He had invited some of the wealthiest people in the city to taste the food of his new French chef, Jean-Luc. In a private corner booth sat a man named Don Giovanni. Don Giovanni was not a politician, and he was not a corporate CEO, but he had more power than all of them combined. He was an elderly man with thick silver hair, sharp gray eyes, and a face that looked like it was carved out of granite. He wore a dark, perfectly tailored Italian suit. Two large, quiet men in matching suits stood near the entrance of the restaurant, keeping a watchful eye on everyone. Don Giovanni was a man of few words. He was also a man who had lost his appetite. 3 years ago, his beloved wife, Maria, had passed away. Since that day, the world had lost its color for him. He ate because he had to survive, but nothing tasted good. Food tasted like ash. Life felt empty. However, a few weeks ago, a close friend had practically dragged him to the Gilded Palette. Don Giovanni had reluctantly ordered the braised beef short ribs. When he took the first bite, something miraculous had happened. For a brief second, the heavy grief in his chest had lifted. The food tasted exactly like the meals his grandmother used to make in the countryside of Sicily. It didn't taste like fancy restaurant food. It tasted like home. It tasted like love. For the past month, Don Giovanni had come to the restaurant every single Tuesday. He always sat in the same booth. He always ordered whatever the chef recommended. It was the only time during the week that he felt a glimmer of happiness. Tonight, Don Giovanni looked at the menu. He noticed the items had changed. The warm, comforting descriptions were gone. In their place were complicated, cold French words. Alistair Vance noticed the powerful old man sitting alone. Sensing an opportunity to impress a very dangerous and wealthy figure, Alistair hurried over to the booth, bowing slightly. "Good evening, Signor Giovanni," Alistair said, his voice dripping with fake warmth. "It is an absolute honor to have you tonight. We have some wonderful news. We have upgraded our kitchen. We have a brilliant new chef straight from Paris. He has prepared a special truffle-infused duck breast for you tonight." Don Giovanni simply nodded once. "Bring it," he said softly. 20 minutes later, a waiter placed a white plate in front of the Don. The food looked like a painting. It was small, perfectly round, and decorated with tiny edible flowers. Don Giovanni picked up his fork. He cut a small piece of the duck and put it in his mouth. He chewed slowly. Alistair Vance stood a few feet away, holding his breath, waiting for a compliment. But Don Giovanni's face didn't change. In fact, his eyes grew darker. The food was technically perfect. It was cooked correctly, but it was completely dead. There was no soul in it. It tasted like chemistry, not love. It didn't warm his chest. It didn't bring back memories of his family. It was just expensive meat. Don Giovanni laid his fork down on the plate with a sharp clink. He wiped his mouth with his linen napkin. "Where's the chef?" Don Giovanni asked. His voice was low, but it filled the room with tension. Alistair smiled quickly. "Chef Jean-Luc is in the back. I can bring him out to meet you." Not Jean-Luc. Don Giovanni interrupted, his gray eyes locking onto Alistair like a hawk. Where's the person who cooked the beef short ribs last week? Where's the person who made the soup that tasted like Sunday afternoon? Alistair's smile froze on his face. He felt a sudden drop of sweat run down his neck. He didn't realize the old man had cared about the previous chef. Oh, Alistair lied smoothly, trying to hide his panic. The previous chef. Well, we had to let them go. They weren't meeting our standards of cleanliness. The quality was slipping, and we care about our guests too much to tolerate mediocrity. Don Giovanni did not blink. He had spent 50 years dealing with liars, criminals, and corrupt politicians. He could smell a lie from a mile away. He saw the way Alistair's eyes darted to the left. He saw the nervous twitch in Alistair's hands. Don Giovanni looked at one of his men, standing by the door. The man, whose name was Salvatore, immediately walked over to the table. Salvatore, Don Giovanni said calmly, go into the kitchen. Ask the dishwashers who cooked the meals for the past 3 months. Ask them where that person is. Alistair's face turned pale. Sir, please, there's no need for that. This is a private kitchen. Salvatore didn't even look at Alistair. He walked right past him and pushed open the double doors to the kitchen. Alistair tried to follow, but Don Giovanni's second bodyguard stood into the path, remaining completely still. Alistair stopped instantly. 2 minutes later, Salvatore returned. He bent down and whispered into Don Giovanni's ear. The chef's name is Cassie, Salvatore whispered. A young black woman. The staff loved her. They say she practically lived here. The owner fired her this afternoon. He told her she didn't fit the look of the neighborhood. He threw her out so he could hire a white French chef to make the place look more elite. As Salvatore spoke, Don Giovanni's hands slowly tightened into fists. A deep, righteous anger began to burn in his chest. Don Giovanni valued respect above everything else. He knew what it was like to be looked down upon. When his family first came to America decades ago, they were treated like dogs. They were told they didn't fit in. To hear that a brilliant artist, someone who had given him the gift of comfort through her food, had been discarded because of the color of her skin and the prejudice of a small-minded man, it was unacceptable. Don Giovanni stood up. He was not a young man, but when he stood, he filled the entire room with an undeniable aura of authority. The entire restaurant went silent. The clinking of glasses stopped. He walked over to Alistair Vance. Alistair looked like he was about to faint. You are a very foolish man, Don Giovanni said, his voice dangerously quiet. Signor Giovanni, please, I can explain. Alistair stuttered. You think a restaurant is made of marble floors and fancy words, Don Giovanni said, cutting him off. But a restaurant is only as good as the heart in the kitchen. You threw away the heart of this place because you are blind. You are blind to talent, and you are blind to human dignity. Don Giovanni turned to Salvatore. Find out who owns the deed to this building. Find out how much this restaurant is worth. Salvatore pulled out his phone. He made a single phone call. He spoke in rapid Italian for 30 seconds, then hung up. The building is owned by a commercial real estate group, Don Giovanni, Salvatore reported. The restaurant itself has a heavy debt. The owner, Mr. Vance, is currently 3 months behind on his commercial lease. Don Giovanni looked back at Alistair, who was now trembling. Call the real estate group. Don Giovanni ordered Salvatore. Buy the building. Buy the restaurant's debt. Buy everything. I want it done within the hour. Alistair gasped. You can't do that. Don Giovanni leaned in close to Alistair. His voice was like ice. I just did. By tomorrow morning. I am your landlord, and I am the owner of your debt. And as your owner, I am telling you this. Pack your things. You have until midnight to get out of my property. Meanwhile, across town, Cassie was sitting in her tiny apartment. The room was dark. The only light came from the street lamps outside her window. She had a cup of tea in her hands, but it had grown cold. She felt completely defeated. She had poured her soul into that kitchen. She had skipped family gatherings, worked through holidays, and given everything she had to make the Gilded Palette a success. And for what? To be told she didn't look the part. to be judged by her appearance rather than her skill. Suddenly, her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. She hesitated, then answered it. "Hello," Cassie said, her voice raspy from crying. "Is this Chef Cassie?" A polite, deep voice asked. "Yes, this is she. My name is Salvatore. I am calling on behalf of Signor Giovanni. He was a regular customer at your restaurant." Cassie remembered the name. The staff always spoke about the quiet, powerful older gentleman who sat in the corner booth every Tuesday. "Yes, I know who he is. Is everything okay? Mr. Giovanni would like to invite you to a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, Salvatore said. "At the restaurant." Cassie shook her head, tears welling up again. "I'm sorry, Salvatore, but I don't work there anymore. Mr. Vance fired me this afternoon." "We know," Salvatore replied smoothly. "But Mr. Vance doesn't work there anymore either. The restaurant has new management. Please, Chef Cassie, Signor Giovanni requests your presence. A car will be outside your apartment at 9:30. Before Cassie could ask any more questions, the line went dead. The next morning, a sleek black sedan pulled up outside Cassie's apartment building. A driver in a crisp suit opened the door for her. Cassie was nervous. She didn't know what was happening, but she decided to be brave. She wore her best professional clothes and held her chin high. When the car arrived at La Gilded Palette, the restaurant looked different. The heavy, dark curtains had been pulled back, letting the bright morning sunlight stream into the dining room. Cassie pushed open the front doors. The dining room was empty, except for one person. Don Giovanni was sitting at his usual corner booth. In front of him was a simple plate of scrambled eggs and toast. When he saw Cassie walk in, he did something his bodyguards hadn't seen him do in years. He smiled. It was a genuine, warm smile. He stood up and walked over to her, extending his hand. "Chef Cassie, it is an honor to finally meet the artist behind the magic." Cassie shook his hand, completely confused. "Thank you, sir, but I don't understand. What's going on here? Where is Alistair?" Don Giovanni chuckled. "Mr. Vance has been permanently removed from the premises. He is no longer part of this establishment. In fact, he is no longer allowed within 3 blocks of it." Cassie's eyes widened. "But who is running the place?" Don Giovanni gestured to the beautiful dining room. "I bought the building, Cassie, and I bought the restaurant. But I am an old man. I don't know how to run a kitchen. I only know how to appreciate good food and good people." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a clean, crisp document. He placed it on the table in front of her. "What is this?" Cassie asked, her voice trembling. "This is a partnership agreement," Don Giovanni said softly. "I own the brick and the mortar, but the restaurant belongs to you. You will have total creative control. You can change the menu. You can change the name. You can hire whoever you want. You will receive 50% of all profits and a full salary as the executive chef." Cassie stared at the paper. She couldn't believe her eyes. "Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me." Don Giovanni's eyes softened, and for a moment, he looked like a gentle grandfather rather than a feared city figure. "I know your heart, Cassie," he said. "I know it because I tasted it in your food. For 3 years, since my wife died, I have felt like a ghost. But when I ate your cooking, I felt alive again. You have a gift. A rare, beautiful gift. A man like Alistair Vance wanted to hide you in the back because of his own ignorance. But I want to show the world what you can do." Tears traveled down Cassie's cheeks, but this time, they were tears of pure joy. She looked at the document, then looked at the old man. "I don't even know how to thank you," she whispered. Don Giovanni smiled and tapped the table. "You can thank me by going into that kitchen and making me a real breakfast, because this French chef you left behind doesn't know how to season an egg." Cassie didn't waste a single second. She tied her apron around her waist and walked into the kitchen. It felt like coming home. The line cooks and dishwashers, who had been terrified the day before, cheered when they saw her walk through the doors. They instantly stood at attention, ready to follow her orders. Cassie gave Jean-Luc, the French chef, a polite but firm nod. Jean-Luc, realizing he was outmatched and outclassed, packed his bags, and left without a fight. Within a month, the restaurant was completely transformed. Cassie changed the name from La Gilded Palate to Big Mama's Table. She removed the cold, snobbish French decor. She replaced it with warm wood, beautiful local artwork, and soft, soulful music. The menu was a masterpiece. It combined the elegant techniques she had learned in culinary school with the rich, comforting southern flavors of her childhood. The restaurant became the biggest sensation in New York City. Critics from the New York Times gave it a 5-star review. They called Cassie's cooking a triumphant celebration of culture and flavor. Celebrity guests, politicians, and ordinary neighborhood families lined up for hours just to get a seat. And every single Tuesday evening, the corner booth was reserved. Don Giovanni would sit there, surrounded by his family. He looked healthier. His skin had color again. His eyes were bright. Cassie would always come out of the kitchen personally to deliver his meal. She didn't serve him fancy, tiny portions. She served him food made with love. One evening, as Cassie was chatting with Don Giovanni at his table, a man walked past the restaurant window outside. It was Alistair Vance. He was wearing a cheap, wrinkled suit. He looked tired, stressed, and completely broken. He had lost his restaurant, his reputation, and his status in the city. He stopped for a moment and looked through the glass. He saw the restaurant packed to maximum capacity. He saw people laughing, smiling, and enjoying life. He saw Cassie, the woman he had discarded, standing like a queen in the center of the room, beloved by everyone. And he saw Don Giovanni, the most powerful man in the city, laughing at something Cassie said. Alistair quickly turned his head away and walked off into the cold, dark night, completely forgotten. Cassie watched him go through the window. She felt no hatred for him. She felt no anger. She only felt gratitude, because Alistair's prejudice had led her to her true destiny. He had tried to bury her, but he didn't realize she was a seed. She turned back to Don Giovanni and smiled. "How is the food tonight, Signor?" she asked. Don Giovanni took a bite of his meal, closed his eyes, and smiled. "Cassie, my dear, it tastes exactly like home." This story reminds us that true talent, integrity, and heart can never be suppressed by prejudice or arrogance. When people try to push you down, the universe has a way of lifting you up even higher. If you love this story, please don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. Share it with your friends and family who need an inspiring reminder today. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can join us for more incredible stories just like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next story.